Hello there. I'm here to talk to you about a cause that has been very important to me lately as we approach our November 4th election here in Florida. I've been advocating for the Yes on Amendment 2 since the beginning, as far as getting the amendment onto the ballot through petitions, to speaking about and volunteering with United for Care to get it passed. And I do have reasons for doing so. There is a lot of hype involved with medical marijuana, or marijuana in general, as well as drug usage. Drug usage is very tragic in the United States. It causes a lot of deaths, sorrow, tears family apart, and there's no doubt about that. However, the current war on drugs that we have in the United States doesn't seem to be effectively solving that problem. Instead, we increase the number of people living in Department of Corrections, tearing families apart even further, and using tax dollars and law enforcement resources. And people wind up uneducated about drug use because the only information they're getting is on the streets, causing them to ingest more harmful substances. In the 1920s, when the United States passed the amendment for prohibition against alcohol, the United States saw an increase in black market crime. The black market bootleggers were booming, as they had no legal competition and no one to regulate them. Not only did they partake in this crime, they raked in high revenues that could not be taxed or traced legally. During that time, a lot of the alcohol available to the users of alcohol was not safe. Because it wasn't able to be regulated, any amount of alcohol content could be placed, any quality level, and it could be mixed with any types of ingredients. The amount of alcohol overdoses were very high during Prohibition. As you know, Prohibition did not stop anyone from participating in the use of alcohol, just as the prohibition of marijuana has not stopped anyone from using it. Whether or not one wants to use marijuana, especially if they are a well-educated adult, is a personal choice. No laws will change that. The only thing the laws will change is how the substance is obtained. A person who purchases marijuana off the streets does not know exactly what they're getting. There is no regulation, there's no nutrition facts available. That marijuana could be laced with deadly poisons, other drugs such as LSD, or anything else. And there's not such a way that they could report it to the Better Business Bureau or the FDA or any other type of governing body, since the purchase was illegal anyway. The Center for Disease Control estimates about 114 deaths a day occur in the United States as a result of FDA-approved prescription drugs. Reminder, these are FDA-approved prescription drugs. In 2012, prescription drug abuse was the leading cause of death in the United States. Of those deaths, 79.9% were unintentional, meaning the person who died did not overdose on the drug on purpose. That in 2011, the year prior, about 14 million emergency room visits occurred as a result of prescription drug overdosage. In 2012, 53% of all drug overdoses were pharmaceutical drugs. That means these were drugs like Oxycontin or other drugs you can get over at a pharmacy versus heroin or cocaine. According to a report by the FDA, between the dates of January 1st, 1997 and June 30th, 2005, when this information was obtained, which wasn't that long ago, on their adverse effects reporting document, marijuana was listed as a cause of 0 primary deaths, meaning based on their reporting, no primary deaths in that time span occurred solely because of cannabis use. 279 deaths did occur with cannabis cited as a secondary cause. This could mean it was mixed in with other drugs, or an action while under the influence of marijuana resulted in the death, likely as a result of the impaired state. this would be no different than consuming alcohol and jumping off of a bridge because of poor judgment. The alcohol didn't cause the death, but it was the secondary cause. Muscle spasm medications caused 118 deaths during this time span as a primary cause, but only 56 secondary. Antipsychotic drugs caused 1,593 primary deaths during that time span and 702 secondary. Other drugs, which is any other FDA-approved pharmaceutical drug that was evaluated on this report, caused 8,101 deaths, primary, and about 492 secondary deaths. These numbers are largely astounding. 8,101 deaths from other class drugs. Mind you, again, these are FDA-approved drugs. In a commercial that the No on 2 campaign put out to encourage voters not to vote for it, Dr. Madeline Butler, a gynecologist here in Hillsborough County, spoke against medical marijuana, and one of her cited reasons was they were not FDA approved or regulated. FDA approval does not mean something is safe. Practically any product you purchase off the shelf, unless it says otherwise, is FDA approved. We are currently accessing items that have high levels of caffeine, sugar, and other substances that can be harmful, especially when used long term. With any type of substance, whether it's a health substance or a food, overuse could be deadly. Appropriate use, in some cases, may be healthy. For example, some studies have shown that red wine is good for the heart when drinking in moderation. Somebody who drank a bottle of red wine a day would probably do more damage than good. Does this mean that wine is automatically dangerous? Absolutely not. It means the way the wine is used could be dangerous. That seems like common sense, but yet that same logic is not applied to cannabis or marijuana. Alcohol is a legal substance now, since the repeal of the 18th Amendment in 1933. It's now regulated and much safer than it was during Prohibition and prior. Education now exists for people who abuse alcohol, and there's treatment available. We don't criminalize people solely for purchasing or selling or using alcohol, unless they use it prior to operating a motor vehicle or another situation which would clearly and obviously endanger the public. The same could be done with marijuana without criminalizing someone just for the purchase or the possession of the item, whether for medical or recreational use. The longer we attempt to prohibit it, the longer we will have these problems. Just as in the 1920s during Prohibition, black market marijuana sales is highly profitable. No intelligent drug dealer would ever propose marijuana or any other illegal drug becoming legal. If it became legal, they would have legitimate competition, which would interfere with their revenue. If marijuana could be purchased at your local convenience store, it isn't likely that anybody would purchase it from a shady drug dealer on the side of the road, simply because they could ensure that the marijuana they were purchasing from a store is safe. If the marijuana they purchased from the store was unsafe, such as being mixed with other substances, that corporation that produced it would be held accountable. That can't be done with drug dealers today. No one can hold them accountable except for the simple fact that their very transaction is illegal, and that's if and when they get caught. There is fear that marijuana becoming legal in a medical or recreational sense will increase the accessibility to children. Children have just as much access to alcohol, tobacco, prescription drugs, and everything else as they would to marijuana. It all comes to education and parenting. Parents need to warn their children the dangers of any substance, overuse, or even single-time use. The government simply cannot stop or protect people from the drug. People have to be able to protect themselves. I'm not saying that if marijuana was legal, it should be handed out to people under the age of 18. However, prohibiting people from the age of 18 and older from accessing it doesn't stop children from accessing it today. Making it legal will not stop them from accessing it, but making it legal will not increase the accessibility for them. Just as alcohol requires you to be over the age of 21, marijuana vendors who are legally regulated would be held accountable if they sold the items to people under the age. We could still have enforcement to perform compliance checks and penalize any vendor who violates those laws. Furthermore, marijuana usage, even in the Amendment 2 ballot, does not mean you can drive a vehicle while under the influence or smoke marijuana in public places. The Amendment 2 ballot, in its full constitutional text, does note that marijuana usage would not be allowed in public places, near places of educational institutions, or while operating heavy machinery such as a motor vehicle. So even if medical marijuana was passed, public safety is still going to be considered. Do I believe that marijuana could be dangerous? Well, it certainly could be. I'm not a scientist or a doctor, and I wouldn't be able to say that it's not. However, I don't believe marijuana in a moderated use, especially under medical supervision, if it's for medical marijuana, I don't believe that it could be any more dangerous than any other substances we come in contact with on a daily basis voluntarily. Marijuana used on a daily basis or used by what they call a stoner is not going to be a healthy product. That's just the same as alcohol used by an alcoholic. Simply put, a casual drinker who has a glass or two of wine or a cocktail at a party isn't likely to have the same negative health effects as an alcoholic who drinks recreationally and on a daily basis. Simply put, moderation and responsible use do come into play. The prohibition of the substance from legal use does not make any users of it more responsible. While it may instill some fear in people, ultimately people who choose to smoke marijuana will do so regardless of the law. Denying that fact will not change the fact. Furthermore, medical doctors who wish to prescribe medical marijuana should have that choice, just as Vicodin, or muscle relaxers, or Oxycontin, or any pill, whether even over the counter, such as Aleve or cough syrup, could cause severe health effects. So could marijuana if it was used the wrong way. If a doctor is supervising this, there's less of a chance of a problem, and if a problem does exist, at least the substance is legal, so the participant has an opportunity to talk with the doctor about the effects it's causing, and determine if it is still appropriate for them to use it or if they should cease. And if they cannot cease, such that if they did develop some form of mental addiction, since marijuana isn't physically addictive, then they would be directed to help. Instead, in the current day, marijuana users, whether recreational or medical, are criminalized. They're taken into the Department of Corrections and put under probation, jail, or prison for non-violent crimes that are victimless. This doesn't give them the help that they need. There's not enough resources within our Department of Corrections available to criminals. The little resources we have should be focused on violent criminals who commit crimes against people, or criminals who steal or commit fraud that harm taxpayers or individual citizens. Instead, we're so worried about what substances individuals are ingesting into their own bodies. There is no compelling government interest to stop anyone from using marijuana, except that they do not want it to compete with their big pharmaceutical backings. The Amendment 2 opposition is heavily funded by a Las Vegas casino conglomerate named Sheldon. I forget the last name. Nonetheless, somebody who doesn't even live in the state is the highest funder opposing medical marijuana within the state. There must be interest somewhere for him to be so adamant about Floridians not smoking marijuana. Furthermore, other large contributors include CVS pharmacies, Publix supermarkets, and other companies such as that. Why would corporations that sell pharmaceutical drugs have an issue with medical marijuana? It certainly isn't because of the health issues, but more so, they do not want their bottom line to be affected by a legal alternative. Individuals who are in pain, as we have seen with the prescription pill abuse, will not just suck it up and deal with the pain. If they cannot medicate through legal means, many of them turn to resources such as the pill mills and shady doctors and get these illegal prescriptions, or they buy them on the streets from anybody to cope with their pain. A lot of these painkillers are addictive, and people who genuinely needed them at one time wind up abusing them. These FDA-approved drugs now become a hindrance on their health and life. If people are in pain and these pill mills are squashed, as Attorney General Pam Bondi claims she has done, they will have no alternatives except to buy from the streets or use illegal drugs. If marijuana was legal as a regulated alternative, they would have another, much safer choice. Since marijuana hasn't shown to cause primary deaths and not very many secondary deaths, it's clearly the safest option. Despite the number of research coming from a variety of sources, people continue to be afraid of it. The only persons that should be afraid of it are the pharmaceutical companies. But remember, when it comes to government and regulation, it's supposed to be for the people and not for the corporations. When you are voting, whether you're a marijuana user or not, you must remember that this is about the people and the choices that we can make. We can make the choice to purchase cigarettes, and the government has required, and I agree with their requirements, that the education about the harms that it can cause be available. Surgeon General warnings are available on all tobacco and alcohol products. We're taught the dangers in schools. There's many resources telling us the dangers. However, as an adult, if we make the choice to make the purchase and use it, that is ultimately our personal choice. No other person is harmed. The government in Florida passed laws preventing indoor smoking with some exceptions. This is again a logical law. Secondhand smoke from cigarettes can and does cause harm. Therefore, it is a compelling government interest to prevent people from smoking in public places that are enclosed. With that in mind, the same could be said for marijuana. We don't allow people to infringe upon other people's health. If I'm smoking marijuana in the presence of my own home, I'm not endangering any other individuals. If I'm smoking a cigarette in the presence of my own home, the same could be said. If I drink a bottle of vodka in my home and do not operate heavy machinery or vehicle, the same could be said. The government has no reason to intervene at that point. When you are voting, I sincerely hope you will vote yes on too. Not because I smoke marijuana, because I don't, but because I believe we should have the right to make the choices ourselves. I'm personally not a believer that the government is here to think for us. We can think for ourselves. The information about marijuana is there. What you choose to believe is up to you. However, your beliefs should not be imposed on another person. If Joe is smoking marijuana, that does not affect you. So why should you restrict it? While Amendment 2 only calls for medical marijuana, it's still a step in the right direction. We should have the right to have an alternative to these highly dangerous pharmaceutical drugs that are designed for profit. Pharmaceutical companies do not create cures, they create customers, and there is no dispute about it. And if you don't agree with that, then I feel that you're not paying attention. The Food and Drug Administration has been under fire for being bedfellows with big companies like Merck for years. It's just more bureaucracy which does not get checked by the public. We have no say in FDA regulation. Whistleblowers have reported against it numerous times, including doctors and scientists. Nonetheless, the FDA, whether you choose to trust them or not, approve many dangerous substances every day that we ingest willingly. The moderation of how we choose to use it is ultimately the difference between life and death in some of these cases. So please, share this video or create a video of your own encouraging your friends by voting for Amendment 2 on November 4th, or if you vote early, is important. It's not about what your personal drug usage is. It's about the individual liberties of the doctors to make their choices to prescribe, and the individual liberties of the patients to have an alternative to dangerous pharmaceutical drugs which have been proven to be dangerous. Thank you for your time.